Trashy, trashy, trashy. How trashy can you be?
It's 1987. My mom, my uncle, and I are at my grandmother's house. And it's a big day because this is the premiere of the Fox Network. It's a Sunday. We're excited. There's a Tracey Ullman show. But there's another show that's on there. And it's one that makes me think a lot, in a lot of different ways, about what is and isn't trashy. Because for decades, American television had a very specific idea of what a family should be. Sitcom families were tidy. Fathers talked wise, mothered offered warm assurances, and usually cookies. Children learned lessons, and it was all wrapped up neatly before the end credits. In other words, complete and utter lies. But one of the shows on that day on Fox absolutely did not fit that mold. And guess what? Married with Children? It might actually have been trashy. Let's start with a very simple fact. The Bundys. The idea of Married with Children was that the Bundys were a family that had a dad, hardworking, underappreciated, not really going many places, shoe salesman by the name of Al Bundy. His wife, Peggy, played by Katey Sagal, and at that point probably the most attractive woman who had ever lived, was, for lack of a better word, a bad mom. But she was absolutely charming in her way. It was really weird. Now, Al's sort of highlight of his life was his high school year, when he was a football star. And Peggy she didn't want to cook, clean, she didn't want to be a housewife. She sat on a couch, she watched TV, she spent money. There's a classic Simpsons gag that I absolutely love. It's the animated version of Al Bundy sitting on the couch. And in comes Peg and says, "Al, let's have sex." And Al says, "No." And reaches over and flushes. You could boil the entire series down to that gag. But really, there's way more to it. What's interesting is that Peg was presented with massive red hair, all done up, always done up, usually with leopard skin pants and high heels. When I saw the movie Casino, Sharon Stone's wife in that, or Sharon Stone as the wife of Robert De Niro's character, really reminded me of her, which is really a strange sort of dichotomy, but I understand it. Because one is married to a casino owner, the other one is married to a shoe salesman. It's an interesting sort of balance there. But you also had the kids. You had Bud Bundy, who was played by David Faustino, who doesn't get enough credit for what he was doing. He was playing like, I'm gonna hate myself for saying this, he was playing like Barney from How I Met Your Mother, played by the incomparable Neil Patrick Harris. And he was supposed to be suave, and at least he was in his head. But when he actually tried to do anything, he wasn't. He was awful at it. In a way, this is sort of a Leisure Suit Larry thing. Very similar concept. And Bud had his following. He absolutely did. But it was Kelly Bundy who was the breakout on this one. Actually, I would argue both Katey Sagal and Al Bundy, as played by the miraculous Ed O'Neill, who, of course, has gone on to so much more success with Modern Family. And he did a couple of great movies. He was brilliant in Wayne's World, and he had like 10 seconds on screen. But Christina Applegate as Kelly Bundy was incredible. She was beautiful. She had no common sense. And she was the butt of so many jokes about her intelligence and her skankiness. But she was also confident and charming and utterly, utterly kind-hearted. Like, that's a surprising thing about this. And you can make the same argument about The Simpsons at that point. They were this terrible family that always comes together in the end to sort of show this new, like, they actually end up being the sweet, caring family. I think that's true of the Bundys as well, except for what they're wrapped in is different. Because there are 4 archetypes here. Al Bundy is the lovable loser. I don't know how to best describe Peg. I don't think Peggy is easy to pin as an archetype, but there's certainly the sort of the trophy wife idea. You have this misguided Lothario who can't actually Lotharize in Bud. And we're supposed to think that Kelly Bundy is the hooker with the heart of gold without the hooker part. But that's definitely the mode that she was created in. Does it work? Is the question I have. And the answer is yes. But it's not just the characters that made it honestly trashy. It was how they were presented. First off, something interesting I just found out was that so all the characters were actually named after wrestlers. Bundys, of course, comes from King Kong Bundy, one of the biggest stars in the world at that point. The Neighbors, featuring Amanda Bierce, Ted McGinley for a while, really an important part of this. Amanda Bierce is sort of one of the... I would argue she was the one who came out of it sort of with the biggest change, who wasn't a main star. Because Christina Applegate was big after this. She had movie offers. She did all sorts of stuff for years. She dropped off, of course, and then she came back with Anchorman. And now she's a spokesman for, I believe it's MS. And it's a really important thing that when you look at, of course, Katey Sagal also got really big. For a while, she was sort of dropped off, but then she came back. And, of course, things like my personal favorite, her and Sons of Anarchy, great. Ed O'Neill did his thing. David Faustino didn't really kick it as hard as the rest, but I believe he's a producer now or a director. But the Neighbors were the Rhodeses. There was Jodie Ventura was one of the characters supposed to be, and also wrestlers appeared. Big Bad Mama, who I've always loved. My personal favorite also, King Kong Bundy, actually did appear as, I think he was a member of No Ma'am, which is, the group that, the anti-women's group that Al founds. It's funny in that the ideas here are over the top, and they're meant to be over the top. And that, in a way, played into the whole idea of the trashiness. They also had strippers on. There were significant storylines with strippers. There was, Al used the word boobies more than a little bit. But at the same time, there is a traditional sitcom sense of the family as a unit. There's a classic saying that all happy families are the same, all unhappy families are uniquely unhappy. And this is kind of along those lines. Now, as anything that pushed these sort of boundaries does, in 1989, there was a massive backlash. And this group came up with a national campaign against the show, mostly about the sexual humor. They wrote letters to the advertisers. They tried to get Fox to cancel it. And what Fox did was very smart. And if you look at Trashy, this happens all the time. Every Trashy thing, this happens in a way. Instead of saying, we're going to cancel it, they doubled down and backed him up and made money off the controversy. You can absolutely see that in Jerry Springer. You can absolutely see that in Jersey Shore. You can absolutely see that in Girls Gone Wild. All of it folds in, and they realize that the controversy, the trashiness in it, allows them to make a new market for this. Now, this is where it gets interesting to me, is that if you look at how television has gone forward, you're seeing a lot less families like the Cleavers and a lot more families like the Bundys. And this became a part of things like political campaigns. The Simpsons was more pronounced, but you also heard the Bundys used a lot as, the disintegration of the modern American family. If you look at something like Modern Family, this is a family that is not trashy, but much, much more anxious. The Bundys were living in a world which was the lowest common denominator, whereas every character in Modern Family is working so hard constantly to not be the lowest common. And in a way, I tend to think that Married with Children is a direct reference to The Cosby Show. It is a family that is not all together, but at the same time still cares about each other. I rewatched a bunch of Married with Children not too long ago, and I'm torn on it. The writing was very broad. At the time we wouldn't have noticed, though. Let's be real. Television changed when Twin Peaks came on. To a lesser degree, you had things like L.A. Law that sort of got to that way, but the writing became, in general, everything from dialogue to concept, all of it, improved after it showed that there was a market to get attention for this. And Married with Children was still on the air at that point. But their writer room seemed to stay very much the same. And when you got to the mid-90s, even into the later 90s, you had things like It's Like You Know. Writing had really changed. And Married with Children didn't really keep up with that. So a lot of it does not hold up. And that's fine. It is a product of its time. But I really think it's nice that those moments exist. Because if you watch another sitcom of the time, Family Ties is an excellent example. Family Ties might have been the best written sitcom of the 1980s. It didn't not push boundaries. It was always trying to do something interesting. The dialogue is atrocious. I watched a couple of episodes and was like, how is something... If this came out today, no one would buy it. It would die on the vine almost. Now, Fox, of course, had a reputation for being trashy. While you had sort of upscale humor in the Tracey Ullman Show, you had The Simpsons that sort of skirted that line. They did eventually get sort of prestige work. Rock was one that I think is a masterpiece that has been sadly forgotten. I think that was Charles S. Dutton? Can't remember who the star was, but was an excellent, excellent show. I remember watching all of it. When they launched In Living Color, things changed again. And as time went on, they evolved, of course. And Fox has led the way in a lot of ways. The reality show world, I tend to say the modern reality show concept really started with Survivor. The talent competition thread, of course, started with American Idol, proving that it could be huge. And they added So You Think You Can Dance, and they went whole hog. One of the trashiest shows of all time, which we will definitely have an episode about here, The Swan, was on Fox. We'll talk about that, and that's a mess. But Married with Children, it's a cultural moment, and I think it would qualify as trashy, which I think is also fine. Remember, this show isn't about saying that trashy things aren't relevant, aren't fun, aren't worth watching. But we do gotta kind of know what we're watching is trashy. And I think Married with Children is. And I think that's also part of its charm. Speaking of charm, let's get completely away from it. When I think of trashy books, I could think of Greenleaf Classics. We'll probably do an episode about them sometime. I could think of Playboy, Penthouse. Penthouse is definitely trashy. Playboy might be too highbrow. But the trashiest book series of all time, which also has serious implications to the entire world of publishing, is a series of books that go by 50 Shades of Grey. And yeah, we're going to talk about it. Hey, I'm so glad you're listening. We'll be back next week with a look at 50 Shades. And remember, if you hate for yourself for loving it, odds are it's trashy.
Trashy.